Ho, ho, ho! Is this thing on? Mic check. One sleigh, two sleigh. That's right. I've got a podcast now. Stories, jokes, and some serious North Pole nonsense. Santa Has a Podcast is out now at santahasapodcast.com. Ho, ho, ho!
Support American jobs while standing up for your values. OldGloryDepot.com brings you conservative pride on premium, made-in-USA gear. Don't settle. Wear your patriotism proudly. Visit OldGloryDepot.com today.
I say this every election cycle, and I'll say it again. The 2024 political field was intense, so don't get left behind in 2025. If you're running for office, the first thing on your to-do list should be securing your name on the web. With a yourname.vote domain from GoDaddy.com, you'll stand out and make your mark. Don't wait. Get yours today.
Welcome to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren. Shea Kateri is in studio, and today is a special show on Venezuela. What was interesting about it last night is how many people don't understand why Venezuela, why it was important. And I'll tell you an important point about this last night, Shea, is I had my driver last night from Miami, who I'd spent, and we'll talk about that more on the show later, and he's right of center. He's sort of the constituent that if you saw a pretty woman when Richard Gere's trying to seduce Julia Roberts, she goes, I don't think you understand. I'm a sure thing. And he's a sure thing Republican voter, but he did not understand why we went to Venezuela, why everybody's upset, why we did it. And so I spent 5 minutes, and he's like, well, that's obvious. Why wouldn't we do it that way? So the show here today is to educate you. We have some great people on who understand it, people who are Venezuelan, the people who actually know what's going on. Our first guest is Santiago Vidal Calvo. He is visiting us today. He works for the Manhattan Institute's Freedom of Information Law, and he was born in actually Caracas and still has family there. He has a master's of public policy. This is just a smart guy who's from Venezuela, and, Santiago, we appreciate you being on.
No, thank you for the invite. I really appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
So you wrote a great piece in the City Journal talking about why what Trump did was legal. Can you explain to our audience how this is legal? Because all they're hearing probably from CNN and Democrats is there's nothing legal about this. This is military intervention. So explain to our audience why what happened was legal.
Well, there are two ways to analyze this. The first one is, and that's the way that we are kind of seeing it from our side, is that there is the American Constitution and the American law, and there is something called international law, which I'm going to take a second to explain after. Okay. In terms of American law, President Trump has acted under Article 2 of the Constitution and defense of the territories. And to explain this argument, we need to explain a couple of things about Venezuela. The first one is Venezuela was an actor in Latin America that was causing damage to the region, but also to the United States and to Venezuelans. So 3 actors at the same time that he was attacking. In terms of the United States, it was a national security risk because he was transporting cocaine. There are credible NGOs in Venezuela that put around 24% of the transit of cocaine moves through Venezuela. But also Venezuela hosts a network of criminal organizations and terrorist organizations like Colombian guerrilla groups, Marxist guerrilla groups like the FARC and the ELN. Hezbollah has bases in Venezuela. And Venezuela has also become a safe haven for international actors like Russia, Cuba, Iran, and China. So we're establishing here a pattern of national security risk, but also to the region. Nicolas Maduro has hired thugs and other criminal networks to attack the United States, like the Tren de Aragua, where we saw years ago the murders of Laken Riley and Jocelyn Nungaray, 2 Americans that were killed by these thugs, hired by Maduro and sent here to the United States. So that's the American argument of the Constitution and why it's legal to do it. Trump has hundreds of years of precedent to do it. Operation Just Cause, it's the main precedent on this case, where they disposed of a similar case, narco-terrorist convicted in the United States, Noriega in Panama. International law, in the other sense, a lot of people are saying it's a violation of international law. But here is where I ask you 2 things. First one is, what is international law? Who enforces it? And the second part is, where was international law for 27 years where Venezuelans were killed, tortured, and kidnapped? because nobody seems to be outraged about that.
Well, and Santiago, not only that, where were they when they all said the last election was fraud? That he was a legitimate president. So where was this international law to uphold something that was unanimously throughout the world, unless you're Russia or China, said this was a fraudulent election, it was stolen, and he's not the rightful president. So where was it?
And there is another principle that, in fact, Democrats under Bill Clinton promoted responsibility to protect in 1990s. And obviously you can see the situation, the conditions in Venezuela, and and the crackdown that has been going on for 2 decades now against the Venezuelan people, and the responsibility to protect the Venezuelan people, the civilians, is a part of international law. But nobody wants to talk about enforcing that, actually, because that requires intervention. And the whole international law is a way of saying we should not be doing anything in a foreign country. And to the contrary, I think the Venezuelan people were very happy to see something being done.
You know, Venezuelans are celebrating. They're overwhelmingly happy, throwing themselves with joy, because somebody is finally on our side fighting with us. And this has been 27 years where international law has been broken. If you go to the Human Rights Commission, Article 25, it says exactly you need to defend the right of the vote and the will of the people. Nobody defended that will when we won that election by 67%. And that's not taking into account 9 million people that weren't able to vote abroad. In a diaspora, the largest diaspora of a country without a war. To put it in comparison, Syria had 6 million refugees and they were in a war. We weren't in a war and we had almost half more of that. So there was no international law, but also Maduro is an actor that has killed extrajudicially about 20,000 Venezuelans. He has jailed at least twice as many others. He has created concentration camps to re-educate people after the election on why Chavez and Maduro are the right leaders. This was not a legitimate precedent by any chance. And Trump getting into Venezuela is not the same as scenario of us going into any country and grabbing a foreign leader. No, Maduro didn't enjoy of the protections and the amnesty that we give to leaders around the world. It's not the same case. Venezuela is Venezuela. Venezuela is not Iraq, nor Afghanistan.
Right.
It's its own case.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm going to go back to something about the election. How do we know it was fraudulent? How do we know it was stolen? To explain to our audience, because we have some people just don't understand what's happening down there. So how do we know that?
So I can tell you for a fact that every single election that Maduro has competed on, all of them have been fraudulent. And they have used many different techniques of fraud during the years. In the first ones, they did it, and that's 2013 I'm talking about. They did it a little bit less crude in some sense. They gave some food to people. They moved them to the polls. They kind of forced people out of their houses to vote for them. But in this one, they just simply made it up. It was a made up number. In how we proved this was that Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader, she mobilized around 1 million people to go to the voting booths and the tallies where people voted and collect something called the actas. The actas is a proof of how many votes they got in that voting booth. And that is legal through Venezuelan law. And they collected almost 80% of the voting booths around the country, and they proved that he lost the election with almost 67% of the vote. It was historic movement. And then they published everything online. If you go online, there is a website, and you can see every single one of those voting booths results online. It was a magnificent, very intelligent act to prove that they stole the election. And how do we know that it was just simply a made-up number? When they released the first result of the election, the number, it was 54% versus 46%. Perfectly divisible number. They did it 52.0. The likelihood that you get a perfectly divisible number on millions of votes is 1 in 1 trillion.
It's exactly right. I always tell my staff when we have a contractor give us a round number when they're canvassing, like, yeah, this is 9 out of 10 times this is false. This didn't happen. When you just give me a round number, right? And we got 50% of the time. No, that didn't happen. My question for you too, Santiago, is do you feel is the rule, the parameters for international law? For example, the United Nations in December released a report that said the Venezuelan National Guard is linked to killings, torture, and repression. This was a UN probe. And the Venezuelan government has used rape. Now, I always find that interesting that these white liberal feminists do not seem to think that matters in any other country but America. what role should they play? I mean, so why are they know all this, they know all the dirty deeds. Why are they so upset with Trump?
Well, let me just say something really quickly for that. It's not only rape. There has been hundreds of cases of rape in El Helicoide and other prisons around the country, but also forced abortions. There are many credible reports of women that have left those prisons, and they have told their stories about how they were forced to abort babies that were put there by the military and that were cause of rape. This is a horrible thing that went on. And, necessarily what I don't think that a lot of people here understand is that this is not your average case of scenario to shine a flag and say free X country. Venezuela has been under a repressive communist authoritarian regime for many years, and they could have stayed communist, and probably not a lot of people around the world would have paid attention, only Venezuelans, and that was pretty much the case, but they became a narco state.
Right.
They became a narco-criminal state with ties to terrorism, and that's when somebody like Trump said, this is going to stop here. And he came with a fixation from the first term to take Maduro out and to remove him from power because he wanted to do this. John Bolton has gone on record saying that Trump wanted to remove Maduro militarily and that there were many actors within the administration and Trump won that stop him. This time he has a more competent team. He has somebody called Marco Rubio, who I think Venezuelans are going to put a statue in the middle of Caracas after him, and they're going to call streets and avenues after him. But we have somebody that understands this issue back and forth even better than many Venezuelans. So he's 100% correct in what he's doing. I think President Trump has really understood where the regime is hurting, and he has totally put the finger there. And I like to say this phrase, which is in Trump's winners and losers world, because everybody's a winner and loser in Trump's mind.
Right.
Maduro was never going to get a deal that was going to make him a winner. He was always going to be a loser.
That is actually such a good point. I'm going to steal it at some point. But
no worries.
With no attribution. No attribution, by the way.
Absolutely not. But, first you make a very good point about the whole Chuck made this point about where is the left, and I always joke that the left's argument is it's terrible what's happening to people in Venezuela or Iran or any country like that, but it's even worse if we do anything about it. And the question I have for you now is, what are the views of Venezuelans on Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez, who ran instead of Machado after she was banned from running? How do Venezuelans view them, and is there a legitimacy for them to eventually take over the stewardship of the country?
And by the way, you have 1 minute left to answer that question. Thanks, Shay. Go ahead, Santiago.
So they view her as a legitimate leader, and I'm going to tell you a couple of facts about it. She ran in a primary where almost 2.5 million people voted, mainly from the opposition. It was a primary for the opposition candidate on the election. And she won that primary with another dozen candidates with 96% of the vote. This woman is extremely popular among the opposition. And then after being barred from competing in the election because the government knew that she was going to do a landslide against them, she put a surrogate candidate who was also banned. And then she put a second surrogate candidate, and that candidate still move the votes enough to show that they lost by a landslide, by almost 70% of the vote. So this woman is extremely popular. She not only has won a Nobel Prize, which has given her bulletproof protection around the regime, because now arresting her or arresting any of her affiliates, it's not like arresting any opposition leader. Now it's arresting a Nobel Prize winner, which is a very different argument.
100%.
That had given her like international credibility and visibility that she didn't have probably before. But also, this woman is incredibly tough. She stood up against Chavez in his prime years and said, compete against me, debate against me.
Well,
and you have been a theft. You have been a thief. You have stolen from the country, and you guys are a bunch of thugs.
Yep.
She said that to Chavez in his prime years. This has been a woman that has been around for years in Venezuelan politics. And she's one of the few that has not tainted her image as much as the other opposition members.
Well, Santiago Vidal Calvo, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people follow you?
Well, you can follow me on X in Santi Vidal C, and you can also follow me on Instagram in Santi Vidal 5, but also with my, I publish almost on a bi-weekly basis on City Journal and other places.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, imagine this. You're running for president. Yes, president. What's the first thing you need? Well, besides the $1 million fundraising, you need to secure your web domain. You need your name.vote. Easy to remember, straight to the point, and a direct link to your campaign. No, but seriously, whether you're getting out to vote or convincing people that yes, you can fix the potholes on Main Street, a .vote domain helps you stand out. It's not just a website, it's a call to action. Head over to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name .vote, and boom, you're ready to make a lasting impact. Get started today with your .vote web address.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren. Sheikha Terry's in studio with us today. This is our special episode on Venezuela. If we can call it a title, we'll call it What the Heck's Going On Down There. And Shay's going to introduce our next guest.
Our next guest is Carrie Filippetti, who's the executive director of the Vandenberg Coalition. Prior to this role, she served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Cuba and Venezuela in the Western Hemisphere Affairs Office and the Deputy Representative of Venezuela at the U.S. Department of State. I will not go through the length of her resume, which is very impressive for such a young age.
It's extensive, and we will post it on our social media so you can get to know more about Carrie. But Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you guys.
Okay. First of all, you had a brilliant interview in Politico. What
Thank you.
Would you like our audience, who will say first grade knowledge of Venezuela at best, what would you like them to know about what Venezuela's been, what's happened with this capture, and what we should be looking forward in the future to have a successful transition for the Venezuelan people?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what's most important to remember is where Venezuela started. This really is a riches to rags story. Venezuela was once the wealthiest country in Latin America. It was a strong partner to the United States. They have the largest oil reserves, gold reserves, incredibly blessed in their resources. And they were a democracy. They brought democracy to the rest of Latin America. But that started to change under Hugo Chavez, who introduced socialism to the country. And very quickly, we saw that Venezuela started its descent into chaos that continued in 2014. When Nicolas Maduro came into power, he was Chavez's vice president, sort of handpicked as a successor when Chavez died. And after he came into power, we saw a really rapid fall. He bricked the oil industry. He started stealing from the Venezuelan people. Corruption was rampant. And his entire administration, his entire regime was responsible for this. Because of the chaos that he caused and that his regime caused, we saw the largest immigration crisis in Western Hemisphere's history. Almost 9 million Venezuelans had to flee the country because of human rights abuses, crimes against humanity, and economic depression.
By the way, can I stop you right there? And you're on a roll,
Please.
but I don't want to stop you there. Do you find it mind-boggling for these white liberals who proclaim to be feminists turn a blind eye to all the forced rapes against political opponents in Venezuela?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I have a Venezuelan friend who comes from the left, and he speaks to college campuses and is often told that they need to support Maduro. And his view is the UN has said that Maduro is committing crimes against humanity. They regularly use rape and torture, including electrocuting genitalia on political prisoners, human rights activists. There's sex trafficking within this regime. It's really remarkable. And I think what's important is that we really emphasize just how terrible a regime this was for the Venezuelan people. And I could not agree with you more. This is what the promise of socialism ends up delivering, is a regime like this.
Carrie, is there anybody in Venezuela who actually does not know someone who either leave the country or was raped or thrown in jail or persecuted? Is that possible?
You have about 25% of the country was forced to flee over the last few years. It's really a signal of, this is about the separation of families. This is about torture, human rights abuses. Everybody has been affected by this. And that's precisely why there is so much support within Venezuela, both for the democratic opposition led by Maria Corina Machado, as well as for, President Trump's operation. And if I could just quickly sort of conclude my historical trajectory, I'll just say the destabilization that they were causing in the entire Western Hemisphere because of the Maduro regime is what led President Trump in his first administration to say, we need to do something about this because now we're getting flooded by illegal immigration. We're getting flooded by drugs. We're getting flooded by threats against us coming from Venezuela, encouraged by Russia, China, and Iran. And so he made it a priority to make sure that we tried to get Maduro to negotiate his path out of power. He refused to do so. This is where you end up.
So, Carrie, you mentioned Russia, China, and Iran. And a big question is, why did these countries support Maduro to such an extent, especially Iran and then Russia and then China?
Yeah, so for each of them, it's a little bit different. Many of them, it's because they knew that this was a region that's really significant to the United States, and it was an opportunity for them to really cause chaos against America. This is true mostly for the Russians, who have always tried to be a thorn in the side of the United States. So their partnership with Venezuela has largely been the provision of training, the provision of small arms, air defenses, notably, that were worthless against the U.S. operation, Wagner forces. So that's Russia's main commitment. China had invested a lot in Venezuela. They're owed billions upon billions of dollars. They're involved in sanctions busting and were an economic support to Venezuela. And with respect to the Iranian regime, this was an area where they really wanted to install Iranian officials, Hezbollah officials, so that they could threaten the United States. Very quickly, there was one former oil minister, Tariq al-Assami, who was bringing in about 173 different Middle Easterners, giving them Venezuelan passports. And it's believed that many of those individuals were actually Hezbollah associated. The plot to assassinate Secretary Rubio came out of Venezuela. The plot to kidnap Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinejad saw her being carried from the United States to Caracas. So there's direct U.S. national security implications for the presence of all three of these actors in the region. And that's what President Trump is trying to kick out.
You know, if you think about it, that's exactly what we've been doing since 1945, having forward presence in the neighborhood of our enemies. And we should not be shocked that they try to do the same thing. And it is very important to prevent them from doing that.
Carrie, let's go and say we have a good transition. And maybe you can explain this to me for a minute. So the natural tendency for people is saying, okay, let's give the government now to the people who won the election. I mean, it's well known throughout the world that this was a fraudulent election, okay? Even the people complaining about Trump doing this know that he's really not president, right? He stole it.
Right.
So let's go, and I understand, I think Trump tries to go and look what Bush did in Iraq and said, I'm going to do everything different. And one thing, when you understand Iraq is because we cleared out all of Saddam's people, bureaucrats and so forth, there was not really a functioning government. Is that a fair statement in a Reader's Digest version?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So I understand why he's probably trying to do what he's trying to do. I think that's how Bush, that's how Trump thinks. I'm going to do opposite of what Bush did. I just think that's how his mind works. But let's go and say we end up having a gradual transition that the really elected leaders take over Venezuela. What does this mean for Cuba?
Yeah, well, I think this is one of the main priorities of this administration is, other than Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, the entire Western Hemisphere are democracies. And that's something that President Trump was really proud of in his first administration. We spoke about these three countries. The troika of tyranny was the phrase that we used. So what really matters here, I would make one correction, which is that a lot of people are making this Iraq comparison, and I totally understand why. We're looking at what people are calling regime change, and there's talk about oil and all of these different things. But I think what's the better comparison is Panama. Panama was one of the United States' successes. It's a country also in Latin America. It also had a narco-terrorist dictator who had usurped authority, who had to then surrender to the United States to face drug trafficking charges. And that was a success, but it was a success for one very specific reason, which was that there was a transition to democratic leadership. In that instance, it was able to be more immediate because, of course, we had 27,000 troops on the ground, which we don't have in this situation. So I think what President Trump is trying to do is to, as you say, allow these interim authorities to continue with the expectation that they will meet certain conditions that we've set on them about countering drugs, illegal immigration, Iran, Russia, and China. The only thing that I would add to that, and this is something Secretary Rubio has alluded to, is also insisting on those democratic reforms,
Right.
freeing political prisoners, reforming the National Electoral Council, all of those steps that would be necessary for us to see democracy return. The current president-elect, Edmundo Gonzalez, who won this election in 2024, even though Maduro claimed that he was the winner, they're very willing to go to elections again. They understand, they know that they have the support of the people, but we need to make sure that the conditions on the ground are ripe for that. Otherwise, you do risk more descent into chaos because of the nature of the regime that is still in power.
I have one last question for you, and we're going to let you go, and this is totally different from that. What should the administration be doing on Haiti? I know it's not your expertise. We've covered a lot in the show. I just feel that is a terror cell waiting to happen to cause complete mayhem in the United States if we don't get it under control. What are your thoughts?
You know what I will tell you? I am one of those very few DC-based people who will say I am not enough of an expert on that topic to really be taken seriously on it. So, I approach it the same way you do, but I leave that for the experts to talk about.
You can just quote me and say, Chuck just says this is
That's what I'll do
total
going forward,
chaos and
absolutely.
mayhem. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you'll come with us again in the future for a longer conversation. You've been fantastic. How do people follow you and your work?
Oh, thanks so much. So they can visit my organization's website, which is www.vandenbergcoalition.org. I don't have much of a social media presence, but I am on LinkedIn. So if that's interesting to anybody, they can find me there.
It's interesting to me.
And the organization is named after the great Arthur Vandenberg, a great Republican senator.
That's correct. Yeah, he's our namesake Republican senator from Michigan. Fabulous guy.
Carrie, we have a text thread with Shay, and he's always bringing up these type of little things. So, folks, you learned today what the Vandenberg Coalition is. Carrie, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend. We hope to have you on again real soon.
Thanks, you guys as well.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back.
Old Glory Depot isn't just a website. It's a movement. Featuring unapologetically conservative shirts and gear, we're proud to deliver 100% American-made products. From premium materials to bold designs, every purchase supports American jobs and celebrates our country. Show your pride, support your values, and shop oldglorydepot.com because patriotism never goes out of style.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, with our guest host today, Shay Kateri, in studio. This is a special episode on Venezuela, and we are so honored that he took the time that Doral, Councilman Rafael Pinheiro, is on with us today. Doral, for those of you who don't know, is on the outskirts of Miami, and it has a huge Venezuelan population. What percentage of Doral now, Councilman, is Venezuelan?
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to be with you guys. I'm here. I'm actually here in Doral. I came from Venezuela when I was 15 years old. So it has been 26 years here in the great city of Doral. Actually, it was before Doral was incorporated as a city. So this is what I call my hometown now.
What percentage of Doral is Venezuelan?
Right now, we have about 40% of our community are Venezuelans.
Well, it's interesting. I was staying at Trump Doral this week,
yes,
and it was funny. You know, you would have my Uber come pick me up, and they had their Venezuelan flags flapping. I actually posted a video on it, and I actually had two of the drivers give me a cigar as celebration for this dictator being on. I brought them for you, actually. They're in my suitcase.
Thank you.
It was wonderful. So tell me, how is the community looking at this, and what do people... look, I think one thing this administration has done poorly is they haven't explained why this was necessary or what's actually been happening in Venezuela. So explain to our audience, as being someone from Venezuela who knows the community, why is this such a big moment for the Venezuelan community, especially those in the United States?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying something that I have been saying since Saturday, since this happened. First of all, this is not about political parties or ideology. I mean, this is the way that I take it is it is not about Republicans, Democrats, or Independents. I mean, it is about principles, accountability, and justice. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, the arrest of a criminal like Nicolás Maduro, that again, he has been wanted by the United States for the past almost 3 years. We have to remember that President Biden is actually the one that put the rewards out for $25 million at the beginning, and that was increased later to $50 million.
Right.
But this is important not only for Venezuela. This is important for a whole region and for the United States. Why? Number one, because, again, you're talking about a regime that has been invaded and partner of the countries that are always the enemies of the United States: China, Russia, Iran. They have invaded Venezuela for all these 26 years. You have a large presence of Russians as we speak, as a matter of fact, in Venezuela. So how we're not going to be happy, number one, that we capture a criminal that since he took power in 2014, he has been involved with not only close to 20,000 political prisoners, but over 10,000 cases of torture.
Right.
To different people just that were people that were protesting against the regime, and they decided to put it in jail and being put it under different type of tortures. So here it's a system that it failed, never worked, and that created an exile of 8 million people all around the world, and United States, especially South Florida, is a witness of that. So again, for more than 26 years, the Venezuelan people had been endured political persecution, political prisoners, extreme poverty, and we have been affected as a country here in the United States for these type of partnerships of the Venezuelan regime with, the regime in Russia, in China, in Iran, in Cuba. You don't have to go that far, but look at Cuba. Cuba has been under a regime for 60 plus years. So my take on this is that for the first time in years, an U.S. government administration is looking into the neighbors. It's worried about what is happening in your backyard, and you're sending a clear message to these regimes that the U.S. government is not playing around. I mean, it is time for a new era. It is time for not only for a better future for these countries in Latin America, but it's also a benefit for us because now we're also sending the message to Russians, Chinese, and Iranians that United States is back in the game when it comes to not only protecting and helping the countries in the region, but also is involved in everything that is happening in these countries.
Can you, sure, with Dorel having 40% Venezuelan population, what are some of the stories you've heard from your constituents about family back in Venezuela? I don't think a lot of people understand just the travesty that's happened there. Do you have some personal stories you can share to give people a better sense of what has actually been happening in Venezuela?
Well, listen, right now you're talking about close to 80% of poverty as a country that is very rich or should be very rich based on all the natural resources that they have. Listen, my family, we left Venezuela 6-7 months after Hugo Chavez took power because my grandfather always was the one saying this is going to become another Cuba. Right. And why another Cuba? Because your freedoms are limited. I mean, the fact that you have right now over 8 million Venezuelans as part of an exile because of regime, just people looking for a better job opportunities, a better quality of life for their families, because you cannot do that in Venezuela. That tells you it's a regime that unfortunately didn't stay just in Venezuela. It's a regime that the same mentality, the same political views were also transported to other countries like Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina at some point. And look what happened to all these countries in South America. So, and we have been affected. We have been affected at different levels. When you talk about criminality, when you talk about, but let me clarify something at the same time. We have seen the benefits of the immigration as well. And
right.
This is something that, by the way, I always like to separate. I'm a Republican. I don't hide that. However, I have expressed my disagreements to the administration when they revoked the TPS for Venezuelans, for example, last year.
Right.
So again, we have to see this as an opportunity that is a benefit not only for Venezuelans, but it's going to be a benefit at the end of the day and at the end of the story, because this is just the beginning. We're going to see the benefits as a country here in the United States.
Councilman, you bring up immigration, and I have a lot of Venezuelan friends. We're going to have one of them later on the show. And if there are three things I can say about the average Venezuelan is he loves America, he loves Venezuela, and he's a church-going Christian. And we love having Venezuelans here. I'm an immigrant myself as well from Iran. So what is the future role for the diaspora, the Venezuelan diaspora? What role do they have for the future of Venezuela?
Great question.
Well, listen, I think that probably right now is not right. I mean, if you ask me right now, there's no future right now. But all the steps that administration is currently taking, at least there is a light in the near future. It might take weeks, it might take months for someone that is already outside of Venezuela, like a lot of people here in Doral, to say, oh, I'm going to go back to Venezuela, I'm going to invest in Venezuela, or I'm going to take my family back to Venezuela. So why? Because the conditions are not there. When you talk about safety, for example, I mean, right now the regime is still there. So we have to also recognize that. I mean, we're dealing with criminals. We're dealing with evil people that's still in charge in everything in Venezuela right now. So the conditions for Venezuelans to say, we want to return, or that's my first option, of course not. And that is something that we still, I think that as an elected official here in the U.S., we still have to be a voice for Venezuelans here,
right,
and to send the message to the administration that the conditions are not to the point that you can say freely, oh, I'm going to go back to Venezuela. So that's not going to happen anytime soon, in my humble opinion. However, I know that at some point we will be able to say that. But right now we have to keep protecting our Venezuelan community that is here in the U.S. Unfortunately, I know the administration is taking a different approach when it comes to a TPS status or any other protection for Venezuelans here in the U.S. But it's our duty to be a voice for them.
Well, Councilman, we're going to wrap up our time with you. We appreciate your time today. Actually, it's just breaking news that Venezuela is now releasing political prisoners, including foreign detainees, and following pressure from Marco Rubio. So I think people need to also be patient. We know what Marco's ultimate goal is on this, and I think he's trying to take methodical baby steps to make this happen and make this transition real for the people of 100%. Venezuela. How do people follow you, Councilman?
Everybody can follow me on social media as Councilman Pinero. Pinero is Pineyro, Councilman Pinero. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can always email me, Rafael.Pinero@cityofdoral.com, Rafael.Pinero@cityofdoral.com. I'm very involved on social media, so feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than glad to answer any questions too. But thank you for the opportunity. Again, this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work to do. Thank you for trying to explain to the community, not only here in South Florida, but nationwide, how important this is, not only for Latin America, but especially for the United States.
It is. Councilman, thank you so much. We hope to have you on again soon. Have a wonderful weekend.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
This is Breaking Battlegrounds. We'll be right back. Sam and I are always talking about being prepared, whether it's hurricanes in Florida, earthquakes in California, flooding in Arizona, or supply chain disruptions.
Exactly, Chuck. When pharmacies shut down, it does not matter how tough you are, you still need access to critical medicine.
That's why we trust Jace Medical. The Jace case comes with 5 life-saving antibiotics and key over-the-counter meds, so you're covered when things get disrupted.
And Jace goes beyond just the Jace case. They also offer first aid kits, daily prescriptions, and long-term nutrition with Jace Pantry. Don't wait for the next hurricane warning or natural disaster. Take control of your health and peace of mind today.
Visit jace.com and use code FUTURE at checkout for $10 off your order. That's FUTURE at JASE.com. analyst.com.
In today's digital world, standing out is more important than ever. Whether you're running for office, leading a cause, or hosting a vote for the cutest pet in town, you need a web domain that's simple, memorable, and action-oriented. You need a .vote web domain. It's clear, impactful, and establishes a lasting presence for your campaign. Don't wait. Head to GoDaddy.com or Name.com, type in your name.vote, and get started today. Because after all, every pet deserves a web address that's as special as they are.
Welcome back to Breaking Battlegrounds. I'm your host, Chuck Warren, with my co-host, Shay Kateri, today. And we're honored to have, if you don't follow Rebel News, follow it. They do some fantastic reporting. And we have on us Alexa Lavoie. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I should move to Quebec. And she went down and interviewed a bunch of Venezuelans in Doral after President Trump did something that everybody in the world says should be done, but then he does it. They get upset, and he went down and captured a known narco-terrorist and a man who was kicked out of office but still stayed in there. So, Alexa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
So you went down, interviewed people in Doral, which is, we just had a city councilman on from Doral. He says about 40% of Doral is Venezuelan, right? And they all have a story. What was your takeaway from your interviews about what's happened in Venezuela and how the people feel about what happened?
But everybody was really happy and pleased of the action of the U.S. in Venezuela. A lot of them have different story, all heartbreaking story, I would say. A lot of them fled under Chavez and others under Maduro. It's all because they either had like different opinion or they didn't really comply to the rules that the regime had in place. So a lot of them say that they are so happy and that if it's because of oil, as the leftists are saying, they say, we never had it. So if it's for our freedom, just take it. And so everybody was celebrating. Everybody was on the street. Some of them were sad to not be with all their family since they got separated when they had to flee the country. And yeah, it was just like a huge and beautiful celebration in the street of Doral.
It's interesting. I had a woman who used to work for me in Miami who was from Venezuela, still has family there. And when the capture happened, she was messaging me just saying, I can finally call my mom. I haven't been back in 10 years. There was just this joy that just went through the text messaging. You can just feel it, this vibrancy, this feel of hope. Did you find that with people that you interviewed?
Yes, obviously, you could feel like the intensity of the emotion of joy that they were experiencing. Some of them were crying of joy. And, obviously, it's not as easy. You don't just remove Maduro and then they are free. Obviously, the regime is still in place, and some of them still fear for their family over there because there is still oppression. There is still some of the people who are following the regime. So we don't know what will happen next, but there is a lot of hope that Trump's administration will bring some change in Venezuela, and that country will be able to be free again.
When you interviewed people down in Doral, did you talk to many of them that still had family they had not seen in Venezuela, family that was in political prisons? Did you come across those conversations?
Yes. There were some people who were telling me that they have family in jail, that they are a political prisoner. As a woman, that her husband, who was in the military, has been persecuted because he had different opinion. I met with a former journalist in Venezuela who, because she started raising her voice against the regime, she had to flee the country with $100 and her daughter. She's a single mom. Another one, it was a IT manager in the oil company. And when Chavez took power, he was requested to have access to all the phone call of the employee to be able to listen. And since he refused to give them access, he had to flee for his safety. There were so many story like that, and also other story where some people were explaining that they had no food, they had no medicine, and that in order to save their children, they had to flee the country in search of a better life.
What do you feel their hope is for the future? Do they feel this to be a quick transition to, a quick transition to elections, a quick transition to democratic elected leaders in the country? What is their expectations, I guess, when you talk to them?
Obviously, they all agree that the best person to govern the country is Maria Corina Machado.
Yes.
But the thing is, they all know that at this moment, there's still a regime, there's still the narco traffickers, there's still a lot of gangs, there's still the Tren de Aragua that are still over there. And they know that the transition will take time, not only to make sure that there is a stability, but also to see if the people who are now governing will actually comply to Trump's demand and to allow that transition to another regime. They all know that it's more complex than it is. But as I say, there is a lot of hope. They really believe that Trump will do what needs to be done in order to bring stability, peace, and safety into Venezuela.
Alexa, you mentioned that you have a quote in one of your in your article, 26 years of suffering, and you just mentioned that they understand that the regime is still there, and we in the United States we tend to call it the Maduro regime, but it really wasn't his regime. It was before him, Chavez, and it's going to continue with the Delcy Rodriguez presidency. It's really deeper than that, and we still have to do much more to change this regime with a better, a regime that actually cares about the people of Venezuela. But I want to ask you, what was the optimism among the people you interviewed about that this would actually happen? And do they believe that the current administration and Secretary Rubio and President Trump can accomplish this?
Oh, yeah. They all believe that Trump is the only person with his administration to do a change over in Venezuela, but not just in Venezuela. A lot of them think that this will have a snowball effect and that will probably bring change into Cuba, Nicaragua, and other country in Latin America. But obviously, if it's not Trump, I don't think it will be mainly possible to do anything else. It needs to be a change in Venezuela. And obviously, as you say, that it's not just Maduro, it's deeper than that. It's and when I was talking with Councilman Rafael Pinero, what he was mentioning is the people who are in charge at the moment, like Delcy, are way worse than Maduro. So, as I say, Trump is pretty strong on what he's saying, that if they are starting persecuting and killing their people, is ready to do another strike. So we will see in the near future what will happen if the people who are in charge right now will comply to Trump's demand, if there would be an agreement in between both countries. But as of right now, everybody is unanimously agreeing that Trump is the man and that Trump will do whatever he needs to bring freedom in Venezuela.
It's one of those things that but people talk about how Trump breaks the norms, etc., and it's like sometimes it's not for the better, but a lot of the times he does things that are so clear cut, and the only question to ask is why wasn't this done before? Like this is the best example for it, or bombing Iran is another one.
But a lot of former presidents have actually promised that they will bring change.
Right.
Right.
But the thing is, nobody actually did something. But what we saw under Trump, and also what did happen in recent years, we saw that China, Russia, Iran, and other foreign entity was actually using Venezuela as a base in America. So in order not only to protect Americans from drugs that are entering the country, but also from foreign influence and foreign entities coming closer and closer to the U.S., something had to be done. And I think Trump, since he doesn't really care about what people think about him and what is the public opinion, I think he just did what he needed to be done since so long. Because, yes, there's literally threats that are coming closer and closer. And also, do you really want the money from that oil going to subsidize terrorism? I think it was the thing that needed to be done. And as of right now, as I say, we need to wait a little bit to see what will happen in the near future. Because as of right now, yes, they removed Maduro, but they just removed one person.
Right.
And there's way more people behind Maduro that are still in place.
Alexa, Alexa Lavu? Lavoie? Okay. One last question. So, I love my Canadian friends. Donald Trump does not care what people think about him, but most Americans, whether they're Republican or Democrat, want Canadians to be our friends, our neighbors. They're our neighbor. What needs to happen to turn down the temperature between the United States and Canada, and Canadians stop being so mad at us? Americans aren't mad at Canada, but we didn't start this poking contest, right? What do you think needs to happen to turn down the temperature a little bit to our neighbors up north?
The problem is people need to understand something. In Canada, about 99% of our media is subsidized by the state, by the government. And so most of the media is just repeating the same thing. And there is like such a hysteria surrounding Trump. Since Trump came the first time in the first mandate, it was the same kind of craziness in our media, and especially in Quebec, I would say. Recently we had like data to show that Donald Trump and the U.S. take more place in our coverage in the mainstream media and legacy media than our own prime minister and premier. So people are just thinking all the time about the United States. And also, I would say that our media are not really neutral.
Right.
They are mainly biased. And what they are actually covering about Trump is always bad. It's always like he is a dictator, he's this and that. And so you need to understand that for Quebec, only Montreal is mainly bilingual and the rest is speaking only French. So the only option as information is the legacy media and mainstream media. But for the rest of Canada, I would say there is a lot of Trump supporter, as well as there is also, like in the U.S., leftists and people who are really against Trump. So for lowering down the temperature, I don't really know what needs to be done, but I would say it's the role of our prime minister to do something, because when he got elected, he promised that he will talk with Trump regarding tariff and regarding, the trade between the United States and Canada, but nothing has been done really so far.
Right.
We are in a really bad position. I would say the cost of living has exploded. And also another fact that there is also the question of mass immigration. So when you have immigrants who are leaving the US, mostly of them are coming to Canada. So we have like a huge problem of like now having too much people in our country. We don't have housing for them. And so the quality of life in Canada is downgrading pretty fast. And so if our prime minister is not doing something regarding our relation with the US, something needs to be done, because I just hope that Canada can be a better place. But I saw through the years that Canada is going down the hill. And if our relationship with the US is not getting better, especially like regarding trades and everything, I don't know what will happen.
Right.
It's just because for so long Canada has count on the US for everything. We are so dependent of the US for, selling our resources.
Yeah.
Instead of developing, example, pipeline and just to export what we have as gas and oil. We didn't do that. And now we have like a huge problem of just trading internationally. And we are counting on the US mainly.
And by the way, one of the sources of tension that goes before Trump was when Biden killed the Keystone Pipeline for no good reason. And that really upset Canadians.
But it's also like a problem with our own politicians. Right. Only the Conservative Party is open to build pipeline. But the thing is, the federal has, yes, the rights to say we need to build pipeline. But when the premier of a province say no, it's being a little bit like difficult afterwards to have like, province agreeing with the federal and etc.
But, Alexa, as far as neighborly problems go, looking at Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, what they do to their neighbors, we are pretty good still.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
Alexa, as we let you go, I just did a little search. So the Canadian government subsidizes its media with over $1.7 billion annually, and you're not going to get much objective journalism when you're getting that much money from the government for media.
Unfortunately, no. And the only few media who don't receive money from the government as us, we are facing censorship. We are facing also being blocked access to cover some type of event. Obviously, when the Liberal Party is doing some political event or some press conference, we are not allowed to go, because we have also like body who are controlling access and which media is allowed to cover or enter in certain places. As for me, if I go to the parliament, I will be not allowed to go in and not even allowed to be on the premises. I will need to be on the sidewalk waiting really far away for the politician to go out of the parliament. It's just ridiculous.
That's not free speech. That's not free speech.
Yeah, they choose which media is legitimate or not, and this is really a real problem. Media should be the fourth power, but as of right now in Canada, you don't really spit on the end of someone who is actually feeding you. So this is the problem.
Yeah. Alexa, thank you for joining us today. Tell people how they follow you and how they follow Rebel News.
Yes, but if some people speak French, they can follow our French channel on YouTube, the Ribbon News Quebec. But we have the Ribbon News on YouTube. We have also ribbonnews.com. That is our website where we have like all our articles and videos. We are also on all platforms. They can follow also my X account, that is The Voice Alexa. And by the way, this is another thing. We are on all platforms,
Right.
but we cannot, if I'm inside of Canada, I cannot even watch the news on my own media on social media because unfortunately in Canada you cannot watch any media on Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms.
I'm still laughing about that report that was issued by Europe talking about how the United States was so dead last in free speech, basically, and Canada and Europe were leading the way in free speech.
You know, Chuck, once we're done with freeing Venezuela, maybe we need to do something about Canada.
Let's not get them started on that. Alexa, thank you so much. We hope you'll join us again real soon. We loved having you. So come on anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day. Folks, we hope you bye-bye. Folks, we hope you enjoyed our special episode on Venezuela. We hope you learned a little bit about it. Look, don't base your opinions on Venezuela on some social media blurb. Get out and study it. There's real reasons what's going on. There's real catastrophe happening down there. There's real heartache coming down there. Once you understand that, you will understand why the Venezuelan people are so excited about the first step. It's not the only step, but the first step to getting their country back to them. On behalf of Shay and myself and Jeremy, we hope you have a great day, and we'll be back with you for the next episode tomorrow. But on behalf of Breaking Battlegrounds, have a good day.